Good morning, and I guess good afternoon, Serge. How are you?
I am excellent. So we are live. This is exciting.
Yeah.
It's been a great build up to this, so I'm really, really happy to be here.
Oh, yeah. Me too. We've been planning this. It feels like for so long since we first learned you were writing this book. I've been so excited to sit down with you and get down to the details. First, we're going to start right off with some questions directly related to the book. Um, I see we already have plenty of people here, so we might as well go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
So, first question, this is a good one. Why another modeling book?
Yeah, this was kind of the one that started it all. And it came from interacting with people in the data space, and especially even people who use SqlDBM. A lot of times came and kind of quietly confessed, like, I actually don't know as much about modeling as I'd like to. And could you
Mhm.
recommend resources? And there's lots of modeling books out there that cover different aspects of modeling. But I just felt that there was a gap, and that gap was kind of for two reasons. One was almost none of them are kind of business oriented. They're
Mm,
more oriented towards a technical audience, again, because it's kind of a technical subject. It's driven by the data team, as we'll see throughout this presentation, but it really relies on input from the business. So I think people forgot that. So I thought that would kind of be a good direction to start from. But the other place where I felt like I wasn't getting enough value out of modeling books as a technical consumer was, once you've understood kind of the structure, you want to get hands on and start transforming the data, moving it around, moving it and loading into these data models. And because now you're dealing with database specific code, you can always kind of describe tables generally. But once you start talking about SQL and loading and DML, that's when, in order to give you that extra step, books would have to narrow down to, like what I did was specifically for Snowflake.
mhm.
And that turns out to be a world in its own. So it was probably as much fun, or more fun even, to write the transformational part, especially given that you can now leverage the specific technology, the specific database, and Snowflake in this case, and take advantage of the little features and tips and tricks that the platform allows you to do. So from that aspect, I felt like, yeah, someone from Google BigQuery or Redshift, maybe they won't get the same value out of this as a Snowflake user might, but they'll get the fundamentals, but they'll also be able to see and understand, even if they can't, even just changing a little bit of syntax, they can apply it to their system. They'll understand the value and understanding the technical aspects of the platform they're working on, which we'll get to, because again, part of why this is so necessary right now, part of why the word value enters the picture, is because the paradigm has shifted in terms of how people pay for data. So it used to be you bought a server and almost whatever you did, as efficient as it was, the server's already paid for. You
Mhm.
can let the process run all night, whatever, as long as it's finished by morning, you're good to go. Whereas now, every time that server, that virtual server is running, you're paying. So it makes sense to think about efficiency. And when you're thinking about efficiency, exactly which technical features of the platform will help you make that process run faster.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the why. A very long-winded answer, but
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know you wrote an article about cloud costs, so you're kind of an expert on that as well. We'll have to link that on
that's all it
our.
takes. You write an article and you're an expert. So yeah, I am definitely an expert on cloud costs. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So tell me who should read this book. I know you said, it's obviously very geared towards Snowflake users, but other people can find some value in there as well. But exactly who should read this? What kind of roles?
I think starting from I wouldn't really even think about it so much as roles. It's really where people are coming from in their modeling journey or in their data platform, in this case, Snowflake journey. So even if you're an expert SQL with SQL, expert with data architecture, maybe you're just discovering the Snowflake platform. So it's no longer just a generic table. that you're thinking of. Again, if you're thinking costs and how do you optimize it, how do you control for history, how do you control for query cache, you're going to really want to understand the factors that contribute to the bill that you get at the end of the month. And from the other side, I think what I'm really trying to encourage is people who are more business oriented. That could be the actual business team, business department. It could be someone like project manager or team lead for, or even the CTO who's kind of controlling. Because what Snowflake does, why are we even having this conversation and a lot of these data platforms, is it democratizes access to the platform. Before, the learning curve was steep, the access was steep, licenses were expensive, whereas these platforms just said, look, you're going to pay us for compute, so we want to make it easy for you. We want to get you on board, get you using it, make it as easy as possible. So now we're no longer talking about the data team. We're talking about the marketing team who you've given their own database to and their own warehouse that you've tagged, hopefully, to their queries, so you know exactly how much they're spending at the end of the month. You can even set budgets. So all these things are now, it's completely risk-free. They can't bring down your production server. They're isolated. And that's why I think this topic is, again, entering people's psyche and awareness, because it does make a big difference when the bill arrives, but also because it's actually a lot simpler than people thought it really is. So just by learning a few keywords, people can establish a common language and work a lot smoother together, regardless of their background.
Awesome. So it's not really just for technical people. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key factors that I tried my best to kind of highlight in the description of the book, is that if there's one takeaway, it really is find a common language, just those few key concepts that the business can understand to help you facilitate those conversations. Because every time you hear about, our data is crap, garbage in, garbage out, our dashboards are wrong, why are people working in Excel? You can kind of boil those all down to one common problem. The data team doesn't understand the business operations. So the things they build, the things they think they understand, don't reflect what the business are actually working on, or don't reflect the nature of the operations that generate the kind of data that we are then storing. And it's both, it loses trust in the data team, it loses trust in the data appliance, whether they're working on the dashboard or the database itself. It just generates this whole, again, ecosystem of siloing and, well, if I can't trust the dashboard, I'll just do it myself in Excel. I can do it faster. I know my data. So at the end of the day, if you can really just simplify it, in the end, modeling, the definition of modeling is just a simplification of something. So if you can simplify something, make it non-technical, then you can really see eye to eye and agree on, as you're getting started, is this right to begin with, where it doesn't cost much to adjust and make changes, and then build it to a point where everyone has already agreed on the premise. So the technical details will come later. And that's what I think we're trying to encourage and foster, is the communication between business and technical teams.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, how are you supposed to, get to those business objectives if you don't have that clear line of communication? So I love that point. And it sounds like, writing this book, obviously I've been talking to you throughout the whole process, and, there's a lot of amazing information in there, and a lot of very technical information too. So it wasn't an easy thing to do, even as technical as you are. It's definitely not an easy feat. So what kind of kept you motivated? I mean, you mentioned that, this was a book that you really wished that you had, but were there, any other factors that kept you going throughout this whole journey?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of them, like you said, was I was writing the book that didn't exist. So I was kind of writing the book I wish I had. So it's very easy to see where you're going, where you have a clear audience in mind, which is you. So you never had to wonder, like, would they like this or that? I always had this doubt in the back of my mind, would other people like it? That's like the $1 million question. But I knew that I would like it, at least the I from years ago. But more than anything, I remember when I shared originally that I was planning to write the book, some people had already known about my articles, my other work on LinkedIn. So I got a bunch of really positive like claps and yeah, let's go, Serge, write the book. It'd be great. And there was like 100 comments. The post went viral. And just one of them, somebody chimed in and said, I'm not optimistic about this book. And yeah, we're not going to name who this is, criticize generally, praise specifically, but
I'm gonna ask you later.
but that woke me up in a sense, and it reminded me that not everybody is your grandmother and just going to applaud you for showing up. People are expecting a lot out of this. If they're going to buy a book, they want information, they want details. And when I saw that, I realized this is it. Like once it's on page, once it's printed in black and white, it better be correct. And there will be haters out there just waiting for me to slip up. So that's also kind of the little devil sitting on my other shoulder saying they're going to be reading this too. So you better triple check every single quote or every single detail in here. And as like in that Michael Jordan documentary, I took that personally, and I never forgot that.
I love it. So
That
are you
stayed with
thinking
me.
haters are your motivators?
Absolutely, they're the best motivators. Your
Well,
grandma's going to be there for you no matter what. You need the haters
yeah,
to
very
bring out the
true.
best.
Yeah. And somebody who's the opposite of a hater, Kent Graziano. How did you convince him to write the intro? That's amazing that you got him on board.
Oh yeah. Kent has been a fan of my work for a very long time. In fact, he discovered my stuff very early on, just like when I was writing my first few articles. He was back then he was the acting Snowflake evangelist. So he had a keen eye on kind of who's writing about Snowflake, the kind of information that they're transmitting. And without even really knowing who I was, he saw one of my article. Oh yeah, he's my grandfather. That's the reveal. He's going to support me no matter what. No,
That checks out.
um, he saw one of my articles, and without even knowing who I was, he saw that I worked for SqlDBM. He wrote to the founders of our company. He said, Serge, this guy you have working for you, he is a complete bum. He doesn't know anything. He is a danger to your brand and probably to himself. He doesn't know Snowflake, and make sure you do not trust him to write another article for you again. Because why? Because the article was about improving performance on properly typing your data types, and when you create tables and how they get efficiently compressed when they're properly typed, etc. Issues that I actually had come up against. And in writing that, I made an offhand comment about the format that Snowflake uses to store the actual tables under the hood. Like, actually didn't even really have anything to do with the article, but I didn't check that fact. I just read it somewhere, or I just misremembered it, or I don't know, but I wrote it and I didn't double check. And Kent picked up on it and he said, yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He didn't even continue to the rest of the article. He just said, this is garbage. And luckily, I guess I had done a good enough job in my other interactions with SqlDBM that they kind of gave me the benefit of the doubt. But that's also a lesson I never forgot of, even when it's not in black and white, even if it's an article that you can go and just correct, make sure to get your facts straight. And even if you think because I didn't just like pull it out of the thin air. Like in my mind, I believed that I had read it, or I just confabulated it, but whatever. So that's another thing of make sure you know. So Kent, eventually he came around, with time, he saw that I hadn't made another blunder like that again and gave me the benefit of the doubt. So great guy, great good for him for coming around eventually. But yeah, you only get one chance at a first impression, and it takes a long time to rectify that if you screw it up.
Yeah, sounds like it. So how ironic is it that I started that out with the opposite of a hater? Didn't know that story. Good to know.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've heard that. And that's so shocking and surprising to me, knowing, the relationship the two of you have nowadays, especially, having him write the intro. So very interesting. And I'm glad you shared that. Just goes to show, you never know who in your life is going to, be a part of your next big adventure.
Yeah. So. You never do. And again, it's also, we all make mistakes. So do your best not to make them, but also if it happens, it happens. Rectify it, acknowledge it, make sure you do everything you can not to repeat that mistake, and hope that people know enough about you and your reputation, kind of your previous reputation, is there to say, okay, he messed up once, but we know the kind of guy he is, and it's probably a one-off.
Yeah. Wow. What a turnaround.
Yeah.
So another point of your book, going from the intro all the way to the middle, you introduced the term transformational modeling. And this is something that I run into kind of all the time at in-person events with people who are a little bit unfamiliar with the difference between relational modeling, what we do, and transformational modeling. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I think that a lot of this misconception on modeling in general is driven by the fact that there's really two worlds in the database profession, which is the operational system, the transactional system, and the data warehouse. And there are people, myself included, that have spent their whole life in data warehousing, BI, who have never touched the transactional side. To us, it's just the source of data that we pull from. So everything, all the modeling, quote unquote, that we do is on a data warehouse, where the difference being data is generated in a transactional system. So you build your schema, you build the entities and dimensions, and then those drive your actual application, whether it's a web store or any other thing that you built. The customer interactions, the sales, they are what drives and brings data to that system. So the data is kind of populating itself through the real world operation of your business. On the data warehouse, that doesn't happen. You're always pulling existing data in, which implies that you're not really having to think about the structure because it's already given. But once you get it, then you have to start transforming it and helping it answer business questions, cleaning it up, deduplicating it. So everything you're doing through transformations. And it's very easy to forget that even though the structure is given on a data warehouse, the relational modeling still has to take place at some point or another, whether it's to design that source system, whether it's to help you understand what's actually happening in that source system, because those same joins that inform the relationships in the source are going to be the same joins that help you create those transformations in a data warehouse. And it also doesn't help that modern BI tools, looking at you, DBT, have taken the word model, and in DBT's case, you can look it up on their website. It literally says a model is a select statement. And yeah, that's true on the data warehouse side, but that's really not the traditional definition of a model. And the confusion comes from the fact that the select statement actually does, if you're selecting data from something, that data has data types, it has columns. So it does give you, especially if you then use that select and create a table or a view out of it, it results in a database object. So you are actually creating a table, you are modeling, in quote unquote. So I felt the need to separate what is the relational traditional modeling from the what I had to call transformational, just to give it a different word. I would have loved to call it logical modeling because you're actually thinking about the logic, the conditions, but unfortunately logical is already a type of modeling, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in this talk, that belongs on the relational side. So just to separate kind of the select, the SQL driven, Joe Reese calls it query driven modeling, from relational classic modeling. You just have to make that distinction.
Awesome. And it seems like the term data modeling, it's become kind of this universal concept. So why couple it to Snowflake specifically over, something else?
Well, I kind of touched on that in the intro, specifically because that's where the fun stuff is. That, you can talk about dimensions and entities and relationships.
Mm.
And yeah, it helps understand kind of where the data is, how to connect it, how to sync it up. But the really fun stuff, at least for a developer, is answering business questions. So on the data warehouse side, all of these things that you build are really in an effort to not drive the business, but answer business questions of, whatever you build on your transactional. Let's say, you automate the sales or customer orders or product deliveries. But on the warehouse side, the business then comes to you and say, okay, how many deliveries did we make last week? Are we up from last week, same time last year? And that's a very different kind of thought process and a very different kind of challenge to just saying, what are the attributes of a delivery? And at the end of the day, those attributes are business driven. So there's not much discussion of, once the business says, delivery has a date, a name, and an order number, that's the end of the story. But as a developer, you've got many roads, many ways you can construct the logic to say, how many did we order last week? And once you start talking about it in the database context, then you can actually say, okay, what tools does Snowflake, in this case, provide? Which little time-saving little functions can I use? But more importantly, the architecture itself. If you don't understand the architecture, because what is Snowflake literally but a platform as a service? So if you don't understand how that platform operates under the hood, you can absolutely get away with treating it generically of, the same select star from table will work on Snowflake as it will on Oracle or Postgres. Mm. But if you're not managing the cache, the query result cache, the warehouse cache, the table history, a lot of these things can just literally be given to you in real time from metadata, costing you nothing, versus taking minutes or seconds or however long to process and compute. So it's the difference between getting something quick and cheap versus long time and expensive. Snowflake and other, let's just keep, I don't want to keep saying other databases. I think at this point, people understand there's other databases out there, but one of the unique things about that's a total mind shift, because nothing else in life works like this when you're working with warehouse sizes and pay as you go pricing, which is in Snowflake, warehouse sizes double, and they double your computing power, and they also double in price. So they're like t-shirt sizes, starting from extra small to small, medium. And everywhere else in life, it's like, if you want something a little bigger, you pay twice as much. If you want something a little faster, you pay twice as much. But because you're paying as you go for what you need, you're paying, let's say, for double the processing power, but now you're spending half the time. So you're actually paying exactly the same. And so you're saying, wait a minute, I could run this, imagine this overnight process that on our on-premise used to take 6 hours. I can pay double the compute and have it finish in 3 and just pay the same, or I can quadruple the compute and have it finish in 1.5 and pay the same. And I still have a hard time with it. So the only caveat is, don't leave it on. Once you've done the thing, remember to turn it off. But also, again, be efficient. Question from Philip. Oh, hey, Philip. Philip and I go way back to our days of SAP. So can Snowflake switch on the fly? There's a more detailed answer, but the short answer is no. So can it auto adjust on the fly? If you need more computing power, it can't, at least on warehouse size. So what it can do is it can scale out automatically. So if you have a bunch of, let's say you provisioned some small warehouses for your data team, and as people come into work, they start, more and more people start running queries. Snowflake can say, okay, we're seeing some bottlenecking starting to happen. We're going to spin up a whole new server. But what they can't do is say this extra large query is taking too long on an extra small warehouse, so we're going to bump it up to medium or something like that. Yeah, so it can scale, auto scale horizontally, but not vertically.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. And let's say you're talking to somebody who is in the midst of or about to start designing their schema. What Snowflake features should they consider?
I would consider, first and foremost, I would consider getting core certified, and at least one person on the team. Like there's an old saying that like when one person is wise, the whole group is wise. I think that's very true when it comes to data teams, because at the end of the day, no, you're not working in isolation. You're always kind of feeding off of each other's code, building on top of each other's design. So you can't help but discover when someone does something nifty and cool. And the best way, you're not always guaranteed to just learn it unless you read through the documentation end to end, which is a lot. But I think the core certification, even if you don't take the test, at least read the curriculum and study and make sure you know those features of, so you know what's there end to end. And when you're thinking about it, you're thinking with the full breadth of the tool set at your fingertips. But if I had to name, let's say, one feature, and I think it comes up a lot actually in some of the examples in the book, which is streams, that it kind of goes hand in hand with change history and query history and time travel, but it's its own thing. So streams is a form of automated change tracking on a table. So every time you make an operation, let's say you insert a record or you delete a record or you update a record, a stream is like a parallel table sitting there independent of your main table. And it records these metadata operations of one record inserted, one record deleted. If there's an update, it'll actually record the before and after. So you can get the delta. If you say, imagine you made a change and you change your customer name and suddenly you say, what was his old name again? You can go and you can see, okay, when this customer changed to XYZ, his previous name was ABC. And both numerically and with strings, you can do that. So it's very easy to automate deltas. And there's a lot of like really nifty things you can do just, and it costs you nothing. You can do this manually, creating copies, comparing. These are not things you couldn't do by hand previously. It's just there automatically that Snowflake just does it under the hood.
Yeah, that sounds very helpful for a technical user. Absolutely. And where do business users fit into all of this?
Business users, I think they fit in, like it or not, probably the same place where technical users fit in, because that line is blurring more and more each day. That if I had to invite someone, again, I'll speak to my own background. I used to work on SAP BW, really, really steep learning curve in terms of the menus, the functionality. A lot of times there wasn't even menus. You had to know all these short codes. Like there's a little screen, you type RSA1, it takes you to one menu. Another short code, TX, whatever, ABC will take you to another menu. Whereas, and again, you're competing for space on the same resource. So if you let a user use your warehouse and he runs a query that occupies all your memory, you now can't run the important processes. With Snowflake, with some of the BI tools, even if you're working on, let's say, Tableau or Looker, Power BI, all they're doing is generating SQL and passing it back to Snowflake. or doing very similar operations kind of in memory. So if you have a good understanding of how SQL works under the hood, what an aggregation is, what a join is, what a drill down is, you can start, and again, they're not terribly complicated concepts. You can just start writing more efficient queries, whether you're doing it through an automated tool or you're doing it by hand, because at the end of the day, an automated tool will limit you eventually. Once you want to kind of step outside the bounds of that, you want to be able to tweak it to exactly what you're doing. Those are just a question on dynamic tables, so we're going to get to that as well. The line is blurring. So what I was trying to say, that more and more what you would call business users are getting their own databases in Snowflake, finding it easier to manage larger amounts of data in a table, and getting it out of Excel and just hooking it up to analytics, hooking it up to change history, CI/CD processes. It's actually not as complicated as it sounds. So I think that tearing down that barrier of it costs us nothing or next to nothing to just do this POC, and then we can scale it up or we can forget about it. That's the innovation, I think, with cloud data platforms that have allowed the businesses to experiment with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And going back to that open line of communication that we talked about at the beginning of this, how easy is it for business users to learn and speak the technical language of modeling?
I think specifically the language of modeling is actually rudimentary. I think it's basic. Once you've understood the concept of an entity or some dimensional modeling concepts like dimension and fact table, relationship, for a business user, it really doesn't need to go much more beyond that. So what you really want to avoid doing is, because again, any kind of language, not modeling or technical necessarily, any kind of language just condenses a lot of understanding into a few words or even one word. So you don't know how many times I would have to explain to, let's say, a business, like asking them, okay, you gave me an Excel. What represents one row? Like, what's a unique record? And they would just look at me like, what do you mean? That one row is one row. I'm like, no. Like, you have repeating customers. So how do I know which one's a customer? And just, again, I'm trying to describe the idea of a primary key or an identifier. Mm-hmm. Once you know what that is, I don't have to explain to you like, no. Like, it's the same name over and over. It's one person, even though it takes up 5 rows. So it facilitates conversations of not only do you not have to repeat yourself, but you're guaranteed that when I say unique identifier, primary key, business key, you're getting exactly what I want you to understand. And if you're nodding in acceptance, then I know that we understand each other. We can move on to more important things. In fact, I could share my screen and just show people some of the examples of the book and what we're actually talking about.
Sure, go for it. This is like a bonus feature.
Yeah, I mean, we can try and get into some of the code and some of the examples here, but kind of already in chapter 2, we're talking about kind of what modeling is, like what we think it is and what it actually is. So, and that includes, the actual SQL, the logic, but this is what we started out saying, that we're talking about what we do as a business to begin with. So usually the conversation is constrained to the data we store and the data that we transform. Mm-hmm. But really, it's when we're saying that a business model is accurate, it reflects what our business colleagues understand and their day-to-day operations, then we're really talking about the big picture. And this is a hodgepodge kind of purposely made of some of the older, a little bit more obsolete or obscure type of models, which understandably give modeling a bad name. when you look at this, it's absolutely unclear, what's going on, what are these arcane symbols. So as a business user, I might take one look at that and say, okay, get that out of my face, you go figure it out. I told you what a customer is. Come back to me when you have some data, and I'll validate it. But at the end of the day, we start with something called a conceptual model if we're starting from scratch, or we're just kind of simplifying an existing view. And a conceptual model is really nothing more than boxes and lines. So I think everyone can come and sit down over something like this and have a conversation of, superhero can have a superpower. Superpower is its own separate entity. There can be lots of superpowers. Not all superheroes have all superpowers, etc. So if these were customers and orders, we can again start to have that conversation of, does a customer make an order? What does an order contain? Does it contain a product? Where does the product come from? So it just kind of at least sets out identifying the pieces. Then we can get into more detailed conversations about what are the attributes of those pieces. So kind of transitioning into, so here we're already showing attributes. Some people say that this is already logical modeling. There's not a clear kind of definition between conceptual and logical, but that's besides the point. It's really having the information at your fingertips when you need it. So you can always scale down once you have a high resolution version of something. You can always scale down and say, like, here it is at a basic level. But if you're working your way up, it's just a natural order of conversations that need to take place. Like, how can I tell you what attribute a superpower has if we haven't even agreed that we're talking about superheroes and identified superpower as one of their identifying factors? So at the very, very, very base level, I think this is what the minimum that a business needs to understand, which I think is pretty clear, not terribly convoluted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense to me. And I'm not very technical.
We'll
So
get you there.
yeah, every day I'm learning something new, really.
Yeah.
Or really like 5 new things. So that's always nice. And going back to kind of the, I guess, maybe misunderstood parts of Snowflake, what are some features that are, I guess, slept on?
Slept on. I think that, it's obviously going to differ company to company. And it's also hard to say because Snowflake is releasing features left and right. So we just came off of Summit. So there's been a lot of really cool stuff unveiled there. Generative stuff that helps you run ML, stuff that lets you create apps, new table types. So actually somebody asked about dynamic tables. There's stuff in the book that that actually was announced not this summit, but the summit previous, and is still in private preview. So there were a lot of things that everyone was looking forward to just haven't materialized, and some have. And dynamic tables is one of them. So in my book, I kind of bet on the wrong horse. I included hybrid tables, and those are still in private preview, and dynamic have made it out into the open. But dynamic tables conceptually are actually very similar to streams and tasks. So we started talking about streams, and again, we're coming back to it. You can think about it as a declarative way of using streams and tasks, whereas streams and tasks are imperative. Like, you say when something should run and what it should do exactly step by step. Whereas dynamic tables are kind of, you write the select statement, and they're kind of, well, again, we don't want to make this too technical about dynamic tables, but it's a select statement that then does the insert, the incremental insert under the hood. So you don't really know how it's inserting the changed records, but it does it automatically and efficiently, and you don't have to schedule it. It does it on its own as soon as it detects a change has been made. So there's already, like I said, there's streams and tasks which will allow you to do that and have more control over it. There's materialized views, which actually do something very similar, but they're limited to only one table, only one source. You can't join among multiple tables. So it's not a game changer in the way that hybrid tables would have been game changers by kind of allowing you to run transactional workloads on an OLAP database and side by side with an OLAP table for analysis. But they are exciting. So like with all things, it manages the compute for you. It optimizes the query for you. So you need to understand the costs, how it's doing that, and kind of experiment before you use it. Because again, if let's say you created a materialized view or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't understand the costs involved, and it's a process that kind of suffers incremental changes every 2 minutes, you're going to end up rematerializing a very large table for the sake of 2 or 3 records, let's say, that are coming in from a stream. So these are the kind of trade-offs of, if there's no right and wrong way, it's understanding the costs and are you doing it in the most efficient way possible.
Very well said. Yeah, that does sound like something that is very overlooked. And I want to ask one more very important question, and then we'll get right into audience Q&A. I wanted to ask you, what do you want people to, get from this book? What's the most important lesson that readers should learn?
Mm-hmm.
I know you can answer anyways.
Yeah. the most important lesson, I think everyone will people will come from different angles. So some people will come being very familiar with Snowflake and wanting to discover modeling. Some people will be lifelong modelers and wanting to know kind of how Snowflake works under the hood. And I think Martin kind of stole my thunder there, communication with the business. I think that's the key at the end of the day. So it's a symptom of the technical role in general, the data teams in general. We are always seated apart from the business, and we're just getting inundated with questions, requests of, help me answer this business question, help me find this data. But we don't know the business itself, whereas a data model can help someone who literally can walk off the street, let's say with some basic SQL knowledge, and get up and running and answering those business questions, because they're kind of getting a map for, assuming the data model is correct and accurate, for the operations, the business operations of that organization. So they can hit the ground running and helping them find the data, link it together, answer business questions. And nobody, at least in my experience, nobody trains you to talk to business people. And if anything, most of us techies come in and we understand these things, and we get frustrated and like, oh, what do you mean you don't know what another unique identifier is? And you start to get this kind of disconnect and condescension, where at the end of the day, if you find that common language, you realize actually the business knows a lot more than you do, at least in the way things run, because that's their job. That's their day-to-day. They can accurately tell you, what a customer is and isn't. They can accurately tell you kind of what contributes to revenue and what is not considered. So these are not necessarily technical questions. And if you can kind of learn to involve them sooner and throughout, then the better off everyone's going to be. So there's going to be more trust from the business to the data, because they'll understand and they'll know and trust the people sitting behind the database. And there will just be a lot of high signal, low noise, and when gathering requirements, less meetings, less time spent in meetings. And at the end of the day, that's the stuff that gets overlooked. So it's very easy to track tickets, amount of tickets raised, bugs fixed, but how much time did you save by not having to do a meeting? How much time did you save when having to just having that meeting take less time, or avoiding the bug in the first place? You feel it when it's going right, but it's very hard to measure. But it's very easy to measure when it's going wrong. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And, on the other side of that coin, it's like, people on the business side aren't always trained on exactly how to communicate with people on the technical side. So I think your book is kind of bridging that gap and getting you on the right foundation for that clear line of communication and reaching those business objectives together as a team. So I love that. Let's move on to some Q&A. Let's start in the actual Q&A. We have some in the chat as well. Here's one. How do wide tables fit in dimensional modeling?
Yeah, good question. Wide tables. For those, I guess, again, one of the things I tried to do in this book is really ramp it up from basics all the way to some pretty advanced but practical code. So one of the ways I did that was by never using a term without introducing it. So let's not assume everyone knows what a wide table is. A wide table is just a table with lots and lots of columns. Mm-hmm. So is the table wide because you just have lots and lots of attributes for a certain dimension, or is it denormalized and you're stuffing several dimensions into it, meaning customer, customer type, customer subtype, customer category, all separate dimensions, all in one table for ease of querying just one select. So normalization, it's a chapter in the book, and I guess the recurring theme also in the book is there's really no right or wrong. It's really, if you have a very high level of SQL proficiency, then you can kind of trust people to do the joins. You can trust them to do their own analysis. Or if you have kind of just a one-stop shop for everybody in your business and they're running dashboards, it might make sense to have a wide table where everything is there. They just need to filter and maybe aggregate, removing duplicates when necessary. So yeah, it's not I couldn't say if it's a good idea or a bad idea. I would just say that know your audience and know when it makes sense. In terms of performance, the fact that it's wide doesn't really cost you anything. It's really when tables grow in length, that's when they start to slow down or consume more resources when you're searching. But extra columns, I mean, again, the slightly bigger footprint, so you're paying for storage, but storage is kind of negligible compared to compute. And yeah, I would just make sure that you know who you're building it for. That some people would prefer everything normalized. They do the joins, they do their analysis, and whereas others would kind of prefer a one-stop shop.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of sounds like you just have to use your best judgment.
Yeah, and maybe even do both. If you have two sets of users, it might make sense to have a kind of pre-cooked, not just a wide table, but part of what goes along with that is you're giving people obviously all the attributes all in one place, but you're also then, since everything's together, you're putting in a lot of the business logic for them. So they don't have to know how to aggregate, how to like sum total year-to-date totals. They don't need to know the formula of an active customer. It's all calculated there for them. But when you're normalizing them, then you're giving people the freedom to say, look, here's the golden source. Some of the metrics that we've put in here are endorsed, let's say, by us or the governance team. This is the official formula for active customers. And if you want to calculate a customer any other way, here are all of the attributes, but make sure you don't call that active customers because there's only one of those in the business and it's right here, and don't confuse people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a question here in the chat. What if everything is already in Snowflake? Where do I start adding keys and other metadata later on?
Where can you start adding keys? Keys are, so one of the things I guess, again, we'll address just so everyone's on the same page. A lot of people assume that Snowflake does not support keys or primary or foreign, and this is not true. And in fact, most cloud data platforms now support constraints. they just don't enforce them. So you can absolutely declare keys, primary keys, foreign keys, that reference keys. So all of that is it's enforced in the sense of a primary key must reference a foreign key. It's just not going to throw an error if you insert duplicates in a table with a primary key. And it's encouraged, obviously, because it's in the metadata, it's in the database itself. So someone, maybe if they don't have an ER diagram, they can still get the DDL from that table and understand what it links to. In fact, even many free IDE tools will take constraints and they'll just draw you kind of an on-the-spot ER diagram. So there's not much business context there, but at least you can see it visually instead of just a list of tables. But they're also a good idea because, again, they're standard. It's in the DDL, so BI tools will know to look for them. So if we're talking your Tableau, your Power BI, your Elation Calibra, your cataloging tools, they will use them to inform joins. One of the other things we talked about in the book and in other webinars is using them to enhance query performance through the rely property. So Snowflake can understand which joins to ignore when it doesn't need them and not bill you for the extra processing. Lots of things that can really make a big difference once you start coupling more and more dimensions into a fact table, trying to give people that one-stop shop of the white table that we described earlier. In terms of other metadata, again, we're kind of limited to comments. So if you have more than that, you're probably, once you get big enough, you're probably going to need a third-party tool, whether it's, I mean, everyone knows I work for SqlDBM, so I don't think I can be called out for being biased, but SqlDBM has a great database dictionary where you can now, we've enhanced it where you can add your own metadata columns, but we're really talking about data cataloging. So there's data cataloging tools out there ranging from basic to hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual licensing fees. So it's really how big of a problem and how big of a help do you need? The analogy I like to use is if you walk into a mall and you're looking for some specific store, let's say you're going to Victoria's Secret, maybe it's a small enough mall where you see a directory and you ignore it and you say, you know, I can pretty much see all the stores from here. I can walk in and make my way there. But at a certain point, you're going to be in a big enough place because BI systems grow, information grows, sources are added, where it's going to just cost you more time to walk up and down the mall than it would have taken you to just stop and read the directory and say, okay, take the stairs and you're where you need to be. So again, unfortunately, not a simple answer. It depends.
It always
So
does.
exactly. If you're a startup, people always say, you know, we don't need modeling. We don't do modeling. We move fast. Yeah, that's great. You know, if I was at a strip mall, I can walk up and down and head to the store that I need to very quickly. But at a certain point, you lose the ability to keep moving fast, and it happens gradually, like that frog in boiling water. So you don't notice it. That looking for tables, asking people, organizing meetings just to find a data source that you're looking for. If that sounds familiar, that's because it is. It happens all the time. It's very common, but it's not an efficient way of doing things. It's not normal. It's much, much more economical to have some kind of cataloging tool or some kind of metadata tool that just press Control F and your table pops up, and it's much less than having people from different departments and different salary and wage levels sitting in a meeting doing nothing but getting information out of their heads and into yours. So get it into a repository and keep it there.
I love the analogy that you use. It makes it so clear. And it kind of reminds me of like, if you're going to Disney World without a map, I mean, how efficient is your day going to be? I don't know. Who's to say?
Yeah.
Next question is more opinion based. This person wants to know your opinion regarding star schema versus one big table in the data modeling strategy.
Yeah, kind of covered that. I don't really have an opinion. It really depends on your needs and your users' maturity with data and SQL. If you're a very analytics savvy, analytic driven, data driven organization, and you can trust your business users to write queries, then probably star schema is the way to go, because it gives them a lot more leeway. Because once a table is dumped into one wide table, there's not a whole lot you can do with it. So all the calculations are there. It's also gonna grow just because it will now sit at the lowest cardinality of the primary key, whatever that is. Whereas, like, even if you have something like a customer segment, maybe you have 3 values for segment, but because you have to now assign them to every single one of your 100,000 customers, you need to aggregate a table of 100,000 just to see that there are 3 distinct values, versus you can have a customer segment entity dimension that you can just in a split second see there's 3 values. I think, yeah, the biggest driver is just going to be the data maturity and the business teams that you're dealing with. If they can handle writing queries, then probably going to be a lot more flexible, and they'll be much happier and self-sufficient than instead of coming to you every time and say, the data I'm looking for is not in this big wide table. How long is it going to take you to get it there? How long is it going to take you to, even though it's going to like aggregate or deaggregate and make this table much bigger and granular for everyone else, but I want this attribute that doesn't quite fit, but I need it. So it also saves you having to fight those types of battles and say, yeah, you need it, but it's going to cost everyone else extra processing, and you're just a tiny department that no one cares about.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And again, at the end of the day, it might be both. So
again, it depends, and it usually does. A lot of these things, you live and you learn, and you use your best judgment. We have time for one last question, and then we'll wrap things up. This person says, Snowflake seems very SQL oriented, hence technical. What would you recommend for helping non-technical users with using and interpreting data products correctly? Would you call it data literacy? Is there any add-on or built-in functionality? Take it away.
Yeah. Because we're short on time, I would start by saying the key word, which is it depends. But the answer to your question, yeah, it absolutely does come down to data literacy. So SQL has been around since the late 1960s. It's not going anywhere. It's a very simple language. So if you're up for a very, I would say, manageable challenge, I highly encourage everyone to learn SQL. It's not going anywhere. And it is the language of data. So it's going to allow you to work on Snowflake as it would on Google BigQuery or Redshift or wherever you go. And even if you don't use it directly, understanding what SQL does, how it manages the data in your tables, is that thinking is going to transition to visual tools, to things like Tableau or pivot tables in Excel. It's still the same operation. It's just giving you a language to do it exactly the way you want it to. So you can absolutely use a third-party tool like a BI tool, like Power BI, etc. And that's going to make it a little bit more drag and drop. So instead of writing select, you drag a column out onto the screen, but it's the exact same operation. So I would highly encourage everyone to become SQL literate, because it's just going to open so many doors for you. And Snowflake now even has graphs and charts built right into the Snowsite UI. So you wouldn't even necessarily need to rely on a third-party tool. You can just kind of write your SQL and play around with it in real time. But maybe I'm biased, but that would be my suggestion. But by all means, if you want a quick and easy kind of drag and drop, the BI tools are getting better every day. Tableau, Looker, etc. It's really, some of them come with like if you're using Google BigQuery, you're going to have Looker built in right into your account. So you wouldn't even have to go out of your way to use it. So like I said, Snowflake is now offering their own kind of built-in option for visualization.
Awesome. Well, We don't have time for any more questions. We will try to get to the ones that we missed on SqlDBM's company LinkedIn page. And I guess I can only speak for myself, but I'm going to go ahead and speak for all of SqlDBM. We are incredibly proud to have you on our team, Serge, and have a best-selling author here at SqlDBM. It's amazing. And yeah, on behalf of everybody, the book is awesome. There's so many great business insights in there and a lot of little known facts. So thank you for bringing that to the world.
Absolutely. And mention the giveaway, because many people forgot that we're doing that.
That's right. We're going to announce the giveaway winner of our book giveaway. We're going to give away a free copy of Data Modeling with Snowflake, and that'll be announced on SqlDBM's company LinkedIn page. So stay tuned for that. And if you registered, if you're here, you're already entered to win. So stay tuned. Other than that, thank you so much for joining me here today, Serge. This was awesome. Yeah, that's it for today.
Yes, I wish we had more time, but we will get to your questions. If we didn't answer them live, we'll ping you separately, or we'll post them all on our LinkedIn and tag you.
Yep, that's right. We'll get to them. So thank you everyone for coming. This was awesome. Thank you for all of your amazing questions, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Take care.